From How to Read Literature Like a Professor by Thomas Foster, it's more than just rain or snow. It was a dark and stormy night. What? You've heard that one? Right, Snoopy. And Charles Schultz had Snoopy write it because it was cliche, and had been a cliche for a very long time, way back when our favorite beagle decided to become a writer. This one we know. Edward Bulwer Lytton, celebrated Victorian popular novelist, actually did write It Was a Dark and Stormy Night. In fact, he began a novel with it, and not a very good novel either. And now you know everything you need to know about dark and stormy nights, except for one thing. Why? You wondered that too, didn't you? Why would a writer want the wind howling and the rain bucketing down, want the manor house or the cottage or the weary traveler lashed and battered? You may say that every story needs a setting, and that weather is part of setting. That is true, by the way, but it isn't the whole deal. There's much more to it. Here's what I think. Weather is never just weather. It's never just rain. And that goes for snow, sun, warmth, cold, and probably sleet, although the incidences of sleet in my reading is too rare to generalize. So what's special about rain? Ever since we crawled up on land, the water, it seems to us, has been trying to reclaim us. Periodically, floods come and try to drag us back into the water, pulling down our improvements while they're at it. You know the story of Noah, lots of rain, major flood, arcs, cubits, dove, olive branch, rainbow. I think that biblical tale must have been the most comforting of all to ancient humans. The rainbow, by which God told Noah that no matter how angry he got, he would never try to wipe us out completely, must have come as a great relief. In the Judeo-Christian Islamic world, they have a fair chunk of mythology invested in rain and its most major byproduct. Clearly, rain features in other mythologies as well, but for now, let this one be our cornerstone. Drowning is one of our deepest fears, being land creatures after all, and the drowning of everything and everybody just magnifies that fear. Rain prompts ancestral memories of the most profound sort, so water in great volume speaks to us at a very basic level of our being, and at times Noah is what it signifies. Certainly when D.H. Lawrence has the flood go crashing through the family homestead in The Virginian and the Gypsy, he's thinking of Noah's flood, the big eraser that destroys but also allows a brand new start. Rain, though, can do a lot more. That dark and stormy evening, and I suspect that before general illumination by streetlight and neon, all stormy evenings were pretty darn dark, has worlds of atmosphere and mood. Thomas Hardy, a considerably better Victorian writer than Edward B. L., has a delightful story called The Three Strangers, in which a condemned man escaped a hangman, and the escapee's brother all converge on a shepherd's house during a christening party. The hangman doesn't recognize the quarry, nor do the members of the party, but the brother does and runs away, leading to a manhunt and general hilarity, all of which is taking place on a, dark and stormy night. Hardy doesn't call it that, but he has great fun describing it in his ironic and detached tone, and the rain lashing down on hapless wayfarers, forcing them to seek shelter whether they can, hence the appearance of our three gentlemen callers. Now, the Bible isn't very, very far from Hardy's thoughts, and I dare say he has no idea of Noah when he's writing this one about the storm. So why does he bring rain into it? First of all, it's a plot device. The rain forces these men together in very uncomfortable, for the condemned man and the brother, circumstances. I occasionally disparage plot, but we should never discount its importance in authorial decision-making. Second, atmospherics. Rain can be more mysterious, murkier, more isolating than most other weather conditions. Fog is good too, of course. Then there is the misery factor. Given the choice between alternatives, Hardy will always go for making his characters more miserable, and rain has a higher wretchedness quotient than almost any other element of our environment. With a little rain and a bit of wind, you can die by hypothermia on the 4th of July. Needless to say, Hardy loves rain. And finally, there is the demonic element. Rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. Condemned man and hangman are thrown into a bond of sorts because rain has forced each of them to seek shelter. Rain can do other things as well, but these are the reasons it seems to me that Hardy has chosen a nice malicious rainstorm for his story. What other things? For one, it's clean. One of the paradoxes of rain is how clean it is coming down and how much mud it can make when it lands. So if you want a character to be cleansed symbolically, let him walk through the rain to get somewhere. He can be quite transformed when he gets there. He also may have a cold, but that's another matter. He can be less angry, less confused, less repentant, more repentant, whatever you want. The stain that was upon him, figuratively, can be removed. On the other hand, if he falls down, he'll be covered in mud and therefore more stained than before. You can have it either way or both ways if you're really good. The problem with cleansing, though, is the problem with wishes. You have to be careful what you wish for, and for that matter, what you want cleansed. Sometimes it backfires. In Song of Solomon, Toni Morrison gives her poor jilted lover Hagar an encounter with cleansing rain. Having been thrown over by her longtime lover, and cousin, it was very awkward, Milkman, for a more presentable love interest, with looks and especially hair nearer the white ideal, Hagar spends a desperate day buying clothes and accessories, visiting her hair and nail salons, and generally turning herself into a simulacrum of the woman she thinks Milkman wants. After spending all her money and psychic energy in this mad plunge into a fantasy image, she is caught out in a rainstorm that ruins her clothes, her packages, and her coiffure. She is left with the despised kinky black hair and her self-loathing. Rather than washing away some taint, the rain cleanses her of illusions and the false ideal of beauty. The experience, of course, destroys her, and she soon dies of a broken heart and and rain. So much for the salutary effects of cleansing rains. On the other hand, rain is also restorative. This is chiefly because of its association with spring, but Noah once again comes into play here. Rain can bring the world back to life, to new growth, to the return of the green world. Of course, novelists being what they are rarely, they generally use this function ironically. In the ending of A Farewell to Arms, Hemingway, having killed off Frederick Henry's lover during childbirth, sends the grieving protagonist out of the hospital into, you guessed it, rain. It might be ironic enough to die during childbirth, which is also associated with spring, but the rain, which we might properly expect to be life-giving, further heightens the irony. It's hard to get irony too high for Hemingway, so too with Joyce's The Dead. Near the ending, Greta Conroy tells her husband about the great love of her life, the long-dead Michael Fury, a consumptive boy who stood outside her window in the rain and died a week later. One might argue that this is simply verisimilitude. If the story is set in the west of Ireland, it almost requires rain. No doubt there is justice in this view, but at the same time, Joyce knowingly plays off our expectation of rain as an agent of new life and restoration because he knows that we have another less literary set of associations for rain, the source of chills, cold, pneumonia, and death. These come together and clash intriguingly in the image of the boy dying for love, youth, death, replenishment, desolation. They're all rattling around in the figure of poor Michael Fury in the rain. Joyce likes his irony about as high as Hemingway's. Skipping a little. Rain mixes with sun to create rainbows. We mentioned this one before, but it merits our consideration. While we may have minor associations with pots of gold and leprechauns, the main function of the image of the rainbow is to symbolize divine promise, peace between heaven and earth. God promised Noah with the rainbow never to flood the whole world again. No writer in the West can employ a rainbow without being aware of its significant aspect and biblical function. Lawrence called one of the best novels The Rainbow. It has, as you would guess, a certain amount of flood imagery, along with all the associations that imagery conveys. When you read about a rainbow, as in Elizabeth Bishop's poem The Fish, where she closes with the sudden vision that everything was rainbow, 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 you just know there's some element of this divine pact between human nature and God. Of course she lets the fish go. In fact, of any interpretation a reader will ever come up with the rainbow probably forms the most obvious set of connections. Rainbows are sufficiently uncommon and gaudy that they're pretty hard to miss, and their meaning runs as deep in our culture as anything you can care to name. Once you can figure out rainbows, you can do rain and all the rest. Fog, for instance, it almost always signals some sort of confusion. Dickens uses a miasma, a literal and figurative fog, for the Court of Chancery, the English version of the American probate court, where estates are sorted out and wills consented in Bleak House. Henry Green uses a heavy fog to gridlock London and strand his wealthy young travelers in hotel and party going. In each case, the fog is mental and ethical as well as physical. In almost any case I can think of, authors use fog to suggest that people can't see clearly, that matters under consideration are murky. And snow? It can mean as much as rain. Different things, though. Snow is clean, stark, severe, warm, as an insulating blanket, paradoxically, inhospitable, inviting, playful, suffocating, filthy, after enough time has elapsed. You can do just about anything you want to with snow. In The Peterson Kid, William H. Gass has death arrive on the heels of a monster blizzard. In his poem The Snowman, Wallace Stevens uses snow to indicate inhuman abstract thought, particularly thought concerned with nothingness. Nothing that is not there and the nothing that is. And as he puts it, very chilling image. And in The Dead, Joyce takes his hero to a moment of discovery. Gabriel, who sees himself as superior to other people, has undergone an evening in which he is broken down little by little until he can look out at the snow, which is general all over Ireland, and suddenly realize that snow, like death, is the great unifier, that it falls in the beautiful closing image upon all the living and the dead. This will come up again when we talk about seasons. There are many more possibilities for weather, of course, more than we could cover in a whole book. For now, though, one does well to remember as one starts reading a poem or a story to check the weather.